Hi, my name is Stacy Hayes, and this is the beta discussion for Module 3. The situation is you just find out that the face-to-face course you are teaching will be offered via synchronous video conferencing to a distance cohort of students at an international location. There are three factors or three things to be considered as a result of finding out this information. One, what factors should be considered? Two, what are some of those challenges of teaching locally and virtually? And what is the best approach to designing the virtual classroom? So, some of the factors that need to be considered when contemplating distance learning instruction might be adequate knowledge. These are some of the things that we need to think about prior to starting an online class. What else do we have the adequate knowledge of the online platform for which this course is going to be submitted? Our LMS program here, the Learning Management System, is the Blackboard system. Um, if you're at a different situation, do you have the tools, the knowledge of how to do that? You need to determine, do you have the hardware and the software, like a webcam, a microphone? Do you have the software, the editing, printing, presentation, like, your PowerPoint, your Adobe Acrobat, um, Open Office, Microsoft Office? Is there enough bandwidth available to do this? And a VPN, your virtual private network, is it going to be a private situation? Are you set up and able to um, provide this kind of an environment? So some of the individual learner considerations that need to be taken into consideration are the time zone differences. Since this is an international class, we need to take a look. If someone's learning something in the Philippines and then somebody else in New York, we need to take a look at that and be sensitive. There are also cultural differences. I've noticed that even from taking this particular class, spelling, for example, focuses versus focuses, enrollment versus enrollment. Those are the differences between the UK and the United States. Um, we might have values and beliefs, religious, gender biases, classes, the hierarchical situation within a culture that needs to be taken into consideration. We need to be sensitive to those things. Problem solving techniques. Maybe they're different from one community to another. Nonverbal cues. If I were to use some different symbols, are they going to be culturally sensitive? So we definitely need to make sure that we're aware of who our audience is. Another couple of things that we need to make sure that when we are looking at an online environment, it needs to be set up before the first day. Everything needs to be ready to roll out. Um, all your informational texts and recordings to assist the students in how to maneuver in that online environment. Maybe they have not been familiar with this particular environment that they're going to be enrolled in, and therefore they need that extra assistance. Discussion boards, you know, Dr. G mentioned it in her lecture about, having social community boards as well as discussion boards that have specific information that pertains to the curriculum and to whatever the assignment is at the moment. Again, having all the materials available digitally, that's important. In the classroom, I can do a handout. Now, in the digital world, I'm not going to physically meet each one of the students. So I would need to make sure that everything was in a digital format that other people can access. Some people might not be able to open a doc document. So the PDF document is one that's super important to know how to convert documents into. When you're setting up your office hours, when you are in an online environment, you have to be, you have to kind of think about what those time zone differences are. If we live in the same environment, if it's a brick and mortar classroom and the students are actually physically coming there, they're in the same time zone. So there's not a whole lot of that needs to be considered. However, um, time zones could be a major point of contention if people aren't able to get in touch with you. So, some of the challenges due to different physical audiences, our local learners versus distance learners, there are going to be some that are going to be the same. But, when we have local learners, we typically require attendance. But again, we said, if they're long distance, if it's a video conference, then maybe this can't be a mandatory attendance. Again, if someone is in New York, someone's in the Philippines, we've got enough of a time difference that they both probably aren't going to be able to make it at the same time. So having recorded lessons would be something very important to look into. The differences, the challenges might be we have a tendency to do lectures when it's a class that we walk into versus the autonomous learner. Those students that are online have to learn how to handle taking charge of their own learning in order to be successful. And Dr. G also mentioned, the assessment styles. I absolutely loved what she, specified about, how in the physical classroom you can provide a test or a quiz and you're observing that student is taking that assessment. However, in an online, we have to prevent that academic dishonesty. The authentic learning is what's super important. And I mentioned this earlier about physical materials versus virtual materials. So those could be challenges. Is there a handout that we normally would give to someone to fill out, or can we put that into a virtual document? So and this was just a thought while I was looking over this, having been both a physical teacher in the classroom, as well as being a current online educator at this moment, I came across this in our reading about instructional strategies. It's interesting. Why can't we take and do the same strategies? I mean, when I'm looking at this demonstration, role playing, guided discussion, simulation, illustration, imagery, modeling, brainstorming, case studies, drill and practice, all of those things were the things that can be done and have been done in the classroom. So even though they will look a little different, that maybe I may not be specifically speaking to an individual for role playing. We could set it up. So I had a one-on-one video conference. So these things are available in both environments. It's just a matter of, in my opinion, as to whether or not this is something you wish to work it into your environment. So the pros and cons and best approach to designing distance learning courses. When I read this question about best approach, I thought about best. When I see that word best, to me it implies that one approach is superior to another. Now, without looking at all the details and doing a needs assessment or a needs analysis, I don't think it's possible to determine best approach. However, by providing face-to-face as well as an online course, we do have a greater opportunity to reach a greater realm of learners. So if I was the individual being provided with that opportunity to be teaching a physical face-to-face class and a synchronous video conferencing distance learning class, I think I would revel in that because there is a way to reach more learners. in a greater aspect, because you have, young learners that are going to, college for the first time, and then you have people who are, for the most part like us, where we've got a different life. We've already been established and we're wanting to come back and learn more. Doesn't mean that we have to in order to be online, but I think that's a traditional set of people who do embark on the online learning. So again, like I said, this being an online course is supposed to be reach an international audience. Synchronous video conferencing probably isn't the best option. So yes, both of them are good, but being the video conference may pose a problem due to that time zone difference. But again, I did say that if recording the lessons are available, then that provides them an alternative to having to be present. And it could also be a positive thing for students who might have a concern in the regular classroom that were unable to attend for one reason or another. So, in summary, online learning presents a completely different set of needs. Even though the outcome needs to be the same, um, the techniques used to engage those learners will need to vary. However, in hindsight, when I'm looking through this, since authentic learning is truly the key, I think we ought to, require more of that project-based learning activities to be incorporated into the physical classroom. Less lectures. That's the way we've been taught, so that's kind of what we know. But I think some of this individualized learning, where we require people to do like what we're doing, digging into it and really getting the meat of the situation, I think that that could be very useful in the physical classroom as well. So, I think that being in that online environment, it's stretching us to really address the needs of these learners and to come up with some new ways to approach what they learn and that they are truly learning it. So, I suggest that maybe instead of us looking at both worlds in an unequal light, maybe we should take what we are learning and implement it back into the brick and mortar classroom. Maybe there will be a larger amount of success in those brick and mortar, because there has definitely been some crumbling of our educational systems across the board. So even though there are going to be differences in how the materials delivered, I can see that there can be a minimal um, difference if there is a desire to to implement these authentic learning situations in the classroom as well as what we're doing here online. So there were a few different references that I took, and so I appreciate you listening to this, and I appreciate any feedback. Thank you.